What if the delay wasn't God saying no, but God saying, not yet? What if heaven has been silent because God has been arranging everything behind the scenes? Joseph knew what it meant to wait. He dreamed of greatness, but his brothers threw him into a pit. He was sold as a slave, yet God gave him favor. He refused temptation, yet he was falsely accused. He remained faithful, yet he was thrown into prison. He interpreted dreams, yet he was forgotten. Have you ever done everything right and still wondered, God, where are you? Have you ever prayed and felt like heaven was silent? Have you ever waited and waited, wondering if God still remembered you? From the pit to slavery to prison, every chapter seemed to move Joseph farther away from the promise God had given him. But what Joseph could not see was that every step had been preparing him for the moment that would change his life forever. Because sometimes, the place where you think God has forgotten you is actually the place where He is preparing you. This is Joseph, the forgotten prisoner. God's perfect timing. After interpreting the dreams of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, Joseph waited. The cupbearer was restored to his position, just as Joseph had said, but he forgot the promise he had made. He never mentioned Joseph to Pharaoh. One day passed, then another. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. For 2 whole years, Joseph remained in prison. No visitors, no freedom, no explanation, just silence. Imagine how Joseph must have felt. Did he wonder if God had forgotten him? Did he question whether his dreams would ever come true? The Bible doesn't tell us every thought that crossed Joseph's mind, but it does show us one thing. He never stopped trusting God. Then one night, everything changed. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, had 2 troubling dreams. In the first dream, 7 healthy, well-fed cows came out of the Nile River. Then 7 thin, sickly cows appeared, and the thin cows swallowed the healthy ones. Yet they remained just as thin as before. Pharaoh woke up, but he soon fell asleep again. Then he had another dream. This time he saw 7 healthy heads of grain growing on one stalk. Then 7 thin, scorched heads of grain grew up and swallowed the healthy ones. When morning came, Pharaoh was deeply troubled. He called all the magicians, all the wise men, all the advisors in Egypt, but no one could explain the dreams. The most powerful man in Egypt had a question no one could answer. Then suddenly, a forgotten memory came back. The cupbearer stepped forward and said, "Today I remember my mistakes." He told Pharaoh about a young Hebrew man in prison, a man who had interpreted dreams, a man whose words came true exactly as he had said. At that moment, Joseph's name was spoken in the palace. The same Joseph, who had been forgotten by people, had never been forgotten by God. Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. Imagine that moment. Yesterday, he was a prisoner. Today, he was standing before the king of Egypt. Joseph shaved, changed his prison clothes, and walked into the palace. One conversation can change your life forever. One opportunity can rewrite your story. One moment can become the answer to years of waiting. Pharaoh said, "I have heard that you can interpret dreams." Joseph could have taken the credit. He could have tried to impress the king. Instead, he replied, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Think about that. After years of suffering, Joseph still gave God the glory. He didn't say, "Look how talented I am." He said, "God is the one who gives the answer." That is true humility. Joseph listened carefully as Pharaoh described both dreams. Then he explained. The 2 dreams carried the same message. 7 years of great abundance were coming to Egypt. The land would produce more food than anyone had ever seen. But after those 7 years, 7 years of severe famine would follow. The famine would be so devastating that people would forget the years of abundance. God had revealed the future, not to create fear, but to give people time to prepare. Then Joseph did something remarkable. He didn't just explain the problem. He offered a solution. He advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise man to store food during the years of abundance, so Egypt would survive the years of famine. Sometimes we ask, God, why are you making me wait? But perhaps God is asking us, will you trust me until the right time comes? Every great purpose comes with great challenges. Every calling is tested before it is revealed. Every season of glory often begins with a season of struggle. Challenges are inevitable, but giving up is a choice. Every dream will be tested. The question isn't whether you'll face obstacles. The question is whether you'll keep believing while you're facing them. Without the night, we would never appreciate the sunrise. Without the storm, we would never understand the value of peace. Without the prison, the palace would never have carried the same meaning. Sometimes God allows us to walk through darkness, not to destroy us, but so His light can shine even brighter through us. And maybe someone watching today needs to hear this. Maybe you've been waiting for a job. Maybe you've been praying for healing. Maybe you've been searching for direction. Maybe you've been building a dream that nobody believes in. Don't measure God's faithfulness by your current situation. Measure it by His promises. Joseph thought he was waiting on God, but in reality, God was preparing Pharaoh. God was preparing Egypt. God was preparing a famine that had not yet come. And God was preparing Joseph for a responsibility greater than he had ever imagined. If Joseph had left prison one day earlier, he would have walked out free, but he would not have walked into his destiny. Because God's timing is not just about getting you out of where you are. It is about bringing you into exactly what He has prepared for you. Remember this: God is never in a hurry, but He is never late. Pharaoh looked around his palace, at all his advisors, at all his wise men. Then he looked at Joseph, the prisoner, the forgotten dreamer, the man everyone else had overlooked. And Pharaoh asked a question that would change Joseph's life forever. Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? The answer would change not only Joseph's future, but the future of an entire nation. To be continued. Subscribe to Divine Chronicles for more biblical stories that inspire, teach, life lessons, and motivate.